Good afternoon. Welcome to the Analyst. Today we'll be taking up 9 newspaper articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express and discussing them. The handout for the same will be available in the description of this video for your kind perusal. Please have a look at that. The first article that we'll be taking up is related to One Nation, One Election, as the Prime Minister's Independence Day call has brought the issue back to the political center stage. The second article is related to Israel and Hezbollah, as Israel has launched airstrikes across southern Lebanon to avert a large Hezbollah attack. The third article is related to the participation of youth in politics, as the Prime Minister's Independence Day call for 1 lakh youth to join politics has evoked wide reactions. The fourth article is related to Ramsar Sites, as 3 new sites have been added to the list in India. The fifth article is related to e-cigarettes, as they now lure children also to smoke. Additionally, we'll be taking up 4 Prelims Snippets. Now, the first article is related to One Nation, One Election. The context behind it is that the Prime Minister in his Independence Day speech again called for simultaneous elections in India, and this issue has been brought back to the political center stage. So we will discuss the need for simultaneous elections in India, as well as what are the challenges associated with it and how can we implement it. This is important in GS2 under the topic Indian Constitution and its significant provisions. Elections are the lifeblood of a democracy, and conducting of free and fair elections is the most important aspect in a democracy, and democracy is based on the premise of political accountability. As the common citizens, they place a check upon the political executives through elections. Now, what is simultaneous election? Niti Aayog defines simultaneous elections as the structuring of the Indian election cycle in such a manner that the elections for the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies, they are conducted simultaneously. Such should be the scheduling. Earlier also simultaneous elections have been conducted in India. For example, they were held in 1951, 57, 62 and then 67 also. But post 1970s, the simultaneous elections could not be conducted because of the premature dissolution of certain state legislative assemblies, etc. Now there is a call for again implementation of simultaneous elections in India. Now, what is the need for conducting simultaneous elections? We can look at it from the governance aspect, because whenever elections are conducted, the model code of conduct is imposed. And when there is model code of conduct in place, then the government is constrained from announcing new welfare schemes. It cannot bring in new schemes, and even the transfers and appointments are also put on hold. The transfers, appointments of the public servants, even IAS officers, they require the approval of the Election Commission of India. Therefore, the normal governance also comes to a standstill, and it even leads to policy paralysis at times, because the government is not able to take up strong reforms or bring in new policies as well. And frequent imposition of the model code of conduct causes these governance challenges. Plus, whenever there are elections, then the star campaigners are invited to campaign for the party. The star campaigners are ministers, union cabinet ministers, etc. And the time that they spend while campaigning for elections, whether it is in the states or for the Lok Sabha, that time could have been utilized for constructive work, for the decision making by the political executives. Plus, whenever there are elections, the district administration manpower is engaged, and the work that could be done by the manpower in the other work is not done. Likewise, it is needed in terms of legislature also, because whenever elections are conducted, then all the parties, they want to appease their vote banks also, and therefore usually a logjam prevails, whether in the state legislative assemblies or the Lok Sabha, because the parties seek to garner attention, and therefore there are frequent disruptions also because of the frequent conducting of elections, frequent disruptions in the House proceedings. Likewise, there are economic arguments also that simultaneous elections will ensure that the burden on exchequer will be lesser, as massive expenditure is usually undertaken during the elections. The parties need funds for campaigning, and therefore they need to collect funds also from the party workers, etc. And usually there are allegations that corruption is also resorted to while campaigning and during the times of elections. And during the times of elections, the wines are usually aggregated. That is, the issues like vote bank politics, communalism, etc. They are at the peak during the times of elections because the parties, they want to seek more votes. And the unpopular decisions are usually not taken. Whenever the elections are near the corner, the government is usually in a dilemma. The dilemma of taking long-term structural reforms versus distributing freebies. And therefore, such structural reforms which cause short-term pain, but they will be gainful in the long term, they are not usually taken up by the government when the elections are nearby. Likewise, the policy indecision is usually higher and the policy issues are not focused. Rather, the issues which are in focus are those which will garner votes for the party. But there are certain criticisms also for the simultaneous elections. What are those? One is the criticism from the aspect of constitution. Article 85 and Article 174 in the Indian Constitution require that the Lok Sabha or the state legislative assemblies, as per Article 174, they should not be dissolved prior to the term of 5 years usually. But if simultaneous elections are to be conducted and if there is premature dissolution of a state legislative assembly, then elections will have to be conducted there. Then conducting of simultaneous elections will not be possible. And there is the political reality that there are untimely dissolutions, both in the Lok Sabha also and in the state legislative assemblies also. There are various reasons. For example, the passing of no confidence motion. For example, a no confidence motion is passed in a state, then the legislative assembly of that state will be dissolved. Plus, sometimes there is the imposition of Article 356 also, that is the constitutional emergency. That is, the governor of that state may recommend the president for the imposition of emergency in that particular state, and there will be the dissolution of the assembly in that state. Sometimes the chief minister of the state also advises the governor to dissolve the assembly, premature dissolutions. And the citizens, they have one way to put an accountability on the political executives. That is to choose them, and that is through the elections. And if the elections are held only once in 5 years, then there is one school of thought which says that it will limit the chances of the citizens to express their displeasure or to voice their opinions against the activities of the government. And it may serve as an obstacle against the democracy also. Plus, the argument that the logistical issues will be solved, that also falls short, as there is a dearth of security personnel also. How will be able to conduct elections simultaneously for the states also and for the Lok Sabha also, whereas only the Lok Sabha elections, they are also conducted in several phases so that the security personnel can be engaged. And there might be the issue of more focus on the regional issues rather than the national issues if such a system is put in place. And the monetary concern, that is the argument that the simultaneous elections will cause lesser burden on the exchequer, is not having enough weight. That is, it cannot be prioritized over the democratic principles, over the constitutional mandate under Article 85 and Article 174. Now, what are some of the recommendations to solve this issue? One, the Law Commission through its 170th report came up with a recommendation that we can club the elections of the state legislative assemblies which are to be conducted after 6 months of the Lok Sabha elections. That is, if there is a gap of 6 months between the schedule of the state legislative assemblies and the Lok Sabha, then they can be clubbed together so that the constitutional provisions are also not violated. And the 79th report of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Law and Justice came up with another suggestion that we can put in place a two-phase election schedule. That is, for some state legislative assemblies, we can conduct their elections along with the Lok Sabha elections. For the other state legislative assemblies, we can conduct their elections mid-term, that is after 2.5 years of the conducting of the Lok Sabha elections. Now for this also again one of the two conditions has to be met. Either a motion has to be passed for an early general election and that motion has to be passed by 2/3 majority, or a no confidence motion has to be passed, and along with it there should not be any formation of alternative government within 14 days. There are certain other suggestions also to come out of this. One is we can ensure that the newly elected house, which is elected after the premature dissolution of the assembly, it remains in place only for the remainder of the term of the assembly which was dissolved prematurely. That is, if an assembly is dissolved 4 years after it was elected, then the newly elected state legislative assembly can work for the remaining 1-year term which was remaining for the earlier assembly. Or we can learn from the example of Germany, where a no confidence motion, if it is passed, then it is usually accompanied with a confidence motion also, and rather than conducting of elections immediately, the alternative government is formed. Likewise, in Sweden, there is the proportional electoral system. That is, the political parties, they are given seats in the parliament in proportion to the percentage of votes that they have polled. That is, the number of votes that were polled in their favor in the elections, they will decide the number of seats that they will get to represent in the parliament. Likewise, in South Africa also there is the system of simultaneous elections. Now, what can be some more suggestions? One, the argument that the logistical issues will be solved by putting in place a simultaneous election system does not take into account that the legal framework has to be given priority. We cannot put the cart before the horse. Therefore, the logistical issues, they have to remain subservient to the legal framework, subservient to the constitutional mandate, because essentially we do need a stable governance, but there are certain other electoral reforms also which are pending in line. For example, we need to ensure transparency of funding in the elections. We need to ensure that the paid news is curbed. We need to make sure that one candidate does not contest from more than one seat, and the women reservation bill, etc. Such reforms need to be passed first. There is a practice means question also. Discuss the rationale behind the proposal for simultaneous elections and examine the key challenges in implementing the system. Please try to write this. Now, the next article is related to Israel and Hezbollah. The context behind it is that Israel has launched airstrikes across southern Lebanon to avert a large Hezbollah attack. They are calling it a preemptory strike. Now, we will be discussing the brief background between Israel and Palestine as well as Hezbollah and how Israel has faced setbacks recently. This is important in GS2 under the topic Effect of Policies and Politics of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests. First, let's look at the map of Israel. Israel shares its boundary with the Mediterranean Sea in the west, Egypt in the southwest, Jordan in the east, and Lebanon and Syria in the north. Israel also has the Gaza Strip under its control. Gaza Strip is a small strip which shares the boundary with the Mediterranean Sea. On the eastern part of Israel, there is the West Bank and Jerusalem. Now let's look at the story in brief regarding Israel and Palestine. The Jewish people, they were facing persecution across Europe and other parts of the world in the late 19th century. So they started migrating to Jerusalem and started settling there. Jerusalem was a part of the Ottoman Empire. When the war broke out, then in the war against the Ottoman Empire, the British agreed with the Jewish people that we will make Palestine as the national home for the Jewish people if you support us in the war against the Ottoman Empire. This was termed as the Balfour Declaration. Now, Palestine became a British mandated territory. After the Second World War, the United Nations proposed a plan to partition. And the war broke out in 1948, when there was the first Arab-Israeli war, the Israel captured more territories than the UN partition plan had proposed. It captured 23% more territories, and Egypt also took Gaza and Jordan took West Bank and East Jerusalem. Then in 1967, the Six-Day War happened. In the Six-Day War, Israel swiftly took up Gaza Strip from Egypt and West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan also. It started controlling that. And at that time itself, in 1964, the Palestinian Liberation Organization also originated. It was led by Yasser Arafat, and they started operating from Jordan. But the King of Jordan prosecuted the Palestinian Liberation Organization activists, and they fled from Jordan to Lebanon. Now, Israel invaded Lebanon in 1978 and 1982 and chased them from there also, and Yasser Arafat called for intifada. Intifada means uprising against Israel. Now, protests rose in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and it became virtually impossible for Israel to govern these areas. Therefore, in 1993, the Oslo Accords came into picture. Through the Oslo Accords, both Israel, the Israeli government, as well as the Palestinians, they mutually agreed to recognize each other, and the Israeli government agreed for the formation of the Palestinian Authority for the governance of Palestine and agreed for a two-state solution, but it did not make any actual land concessions, and the areas remained under its control largely. Now, coming back to the Hezbollah, which is now attacking Israel. Hezbollah, it is termed as the party of God. It means the party of God. It is the world's most heavily armed non-state actor. It has artillery rockets. It has access to anti-tank missiles, anti-ship missiles, unmanned aerial vehicles, etc., which it gets from Russia also. It is a Lebanon-based militant group. Essentially, it comprises of Shia militias, and Iran backs these Shia militias, and therefore they have pledged allegiance to the Palestinian cause. Now, this Hezbollah is retaliating because Israel assassinated the senior commander of Hezbollah, Fauj Shukr, and it started pounding Israel with rockets and missiles, etc. Now, how did Hezbollah originate actually? Lebanon was under a French mandate until 1943. Then the Lebanese civil war broke out in 1975. It continued till 1990, and there was simultaneously a simmering long-time discontent over the large armed Palestinian presence in Lebanon. And further, there was the arrival of Palestinian refugees from 1948 onwards, the first Arab-Israeli war. It also led to further the origination of Hezbollah, and then the Israeli forces also invaded southern Lebanon in 1978 and 1982 to expel the Palestinian guerrilla fighters from there. Therefore, the Hezbollah took birth, and it was also inspired by the theocratic Islamic government which was formed in Iran in 1979. Today, Hezbollah has 13 of 128 seats in the parliament of Lebanon, and it forms part of the ruling government also with its allies. But within Lebanon also there are conditions of worsening poverty, unemployment, as well as rising government debt, which has led to protests within Lebanon also against Hezbollah. Now, how has Israel faced setbacks recently? One is it launched an attack in Gaza to take out Hamas, calling it a militant organization. But recently, an Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson itself has admitted that Hamas is an idea. Hamas is a party. It's rooted in the hearts of the people. It's been more than 10 months since Israel has been at war against Hamas in Gaza. Almost 2% of Gaza's population has been killed. About 40,000 people in Gaza have been killed. But still, there is no end to the war. The objectives that Israel sought to achieve through this war were to destroy the governing structures of Hamas, to defeat its highly trained brigades, to destroy the vast tunnel networks that Hamas has built to enter into the Israeli territory, and to kill the top leadership of Hamas. But still there is no clarity whether Israel has been able to achieve these objectives, and the war continues. Plus, Hezbollah has also started pounding Israel with rocket attacks and shelling, which has displaced more than 60,000, about 70,000 Israelis. Now, with this attack, Israel wanted to ensure that it bolsters its deterrence against the non-state actors by defeating Hamas. But what did it lead to? It led to the weakening of the conventional deterrence. That is, Israel took out certain Iranian military commanders in other countries, for example, through the airstrike in Syria, but Iran retaliated. Iran launched a barrage of missiles and drones into Israel. But Israel has not responded again by attacking more of Iranian personnel, because USA also does not want a war with Iran, and Israel also does not want a war with Iran as of now, because it is already engaged with Hamas. Now this was a convenient time for Iran. Iran has fast-tracked its own nuclear program. Because USA does not want to engage with Iran now, Iran has speeded up its own nuclear facilities, enrichment of uranium in its two facilities particularly, that is Natanz and Fordo in Iran. This is also a setback to the normalization of the ties of Israel with the Arab world. Earlier, there was the process of normalization which was happening gradually, for example, through the Abraham Accords of 2020 with the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and even the talks with Saudi Arabia were in place, which were being mediated by USA, but they have also been shelved because again there have been a global isolation which Israel is facing now. There were two UNSC resolutions also calling for the ceasefire in Gaza, which have been ignored by Israel till now. Even a genocide case has been filed at the International Court of Justice, and students are protesting in universities across the West against the Israeli attacks in the Gaza Strip. Now the Palestinian question has again been brought to the forefront after 2020, because after the Abraham Accords, it was seen that the Palestinian question is not of that much importance to the Arab world, but now it has again arisen and it is at the forefront now. What is India's stand in this? India says that we support the just Palestinian cause. Various political parties have also come out supporting the Palestinian cause, and we have an unwavering commitment to the two-state solution. Plus, we say that the historic status quo at the holy places of Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount, they must be respected. And we believe in dehyphenation. There is a practice means question also. The ongoing Israel-Hezbollah conflict and the Israeli-Palestinian issue are interlinked elements of the broader Middle Eastern geopolitical landscape. Analyze the historical roots and current dynamics of the Israel-Hezbollah conflict and its impact on regional stability. Please try to write it. The next article is related to the participation of youth in politics. The context behind it is that the Prime Minister has said in his Independence Day speech that 1 lakh youth without any political background should join politics, and it has evoked wide reactions and urged the young people to enter public life. So we will discuss the status of participation of youth in politics in India and why youth are not interested in joining politics in India. This is important in GS2 in governance and in GS4 under the topic political attitude. Now, what is the status of political participation of youth in India? The average age of MPs in the present Lok Sabha, it is about 55 or 56 years. So India can be called as a young country with old politicians. We have a huge demographic dividend at our disposal, but the people who are governing us, they are aged. 11% MPs in the present Lok Sabha are less than 40, only 11%. And when we look at the voter registration by the youth also, that is also pretty low. For example, in Uttar Pradesh, only about 25% of the youth who are eligible to register themselves as voters have registered. Whereas globally there are other examples. For example, in Finland, Sanna Marin is the youngest female Prime Minister of Finland at the age of 34 years. Likewise, Gabriel Boric became the youngest president of Chile, now about 38 years. Now, why are youth not interested in joining politics in India? Why the participation of youth is poor in politics in India? One reason is that the gestation period in politics is long. That is, the results, the output, the fruits of the struggle come after a long time. That is, you have to be a party worker for several years or even decades before you get a party ticket. And even after that, the chances of winning, they are not 100%. Plus, there is dynastic politics. For example, the Huddas, the Chotalas, the Thakres, the Nehru-Gandhi family, etc. Dynastic politics is there in India. And there is another issue of financial constraint. That is, even the former Prime Minister of India, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, had remarked that the Indian democracy is shifting from Jantantra to Dhantantra. That is, it is shifting from rule of the people to rule of money, as money is required to contest elections, for the campaigning, for election expenditures, etc. Also, there is the social pressure and cultural norms. That is, in our society, we prefer secure career choices, for example, government jobs, rather than joining politics. Plus, there is the lack of political education also, and there is a common perception that you can enter politics and you can survive in politics only through corruption. There is the fear of backlash also. What if you try to join politics today and tomorrow you prepare for an exam and there the administrative authorities feel that you have a political background and there might be a backlash. There are lowering standards of public discourse. The speeches made by the politicians, they also discourage the youth, and there is even ideological confusion in the party lines. Across party lines, there is lack of clarity in ideology also. These are the reasons which discourage youth from participation in politics. Now, why do we need youth participation? What is its importance? We have history to teach us here. The young leaders, the youth leaders guided the freedom struggle of India. For example, Subhash Chandra Bose, Nehru, Ambedkar, etc. Plus, the youth, if they join politics, they will be bringing in fresh perspective. They will be bringing in innovative ideas for the problems that India faces, and it will ensure that the democratic credentials of India, they are taken forward. Now, what can be the suggestions to encourage youth to join politics? One is we need to bring in electoral reforms. For example, conducting of delimitation, increasing in seats, increasing of the number of people who represent the will of the people, the electorate in India. This will ensure that the youth have the perception that they have a chance to participate in governance, to participate in politics. And another method can be, we can incentivize voting. We can make voting compulsory or at least incentivize it. How it will help is, it will increase the voter turnout and it will diminish the chances of a loyal vote bank from making a decision in the elections. For example, if 25% of the electorate is the loyal vote bank of a certain candidate, and if the total voter turnout is 50% only, then that loyal vote bank, that secure vote bank of that candidate itself will ensure that the candidate wins in the election. Whereas if the turnout is 100%, then only 25%, which is the loyal vote bank of that candidate, will not be able to make a decisive impact on the outcome of the elections. The remaining 75% will. Plus, we can curb the freebies. If the freebies are curbed, then there will be genuine political engagement which the parties will have to do with the citizens, and it will ensure electoral reforms. We can conduct internship programs. That is, the political parties can be encouraged to have internship programs to encourage youth to join them. New courses can also be introduced in curriculum to encourage youth to participate, and opportunism can be deterred. That is, the Candidates or the people who want to join politics for opportunism, they can be deterred by eliminating corruption. And another way can be the approach of Plato. That is, if you refuse to join politics, the consequence will be that you are accepting that you may end up being governed by your inferiors. There is a practice means question. Despite the significant role that youth can play in shaping democratic processes, their participation in politics remains notably low. Analyze the reasons behind the low political engagement of youth. Suggest measures that could be implemented to enhance youth participation in the political process. Please try to write it. The next article is related to Ramsar Sites. The context behind it is that 3 new sites have been added to the list in India. We'll be discussing the significance of Ramsar Sites in India. This is important in GS3 under the topic Conservation, Environmental Pollution and Degradation and Environmental Impact Assessment. First, what are the Ramsar Sites? As per the Ramsar Convention, they are defined as the areas which consist of marshes, fen, peatland or water, that is swampy areas, whether they are natural or artificial, whether they are permanent or temporary, with water that is static or flowing, whether it is fresh water or brackish or salt water. And it also includes areas of marine water where the depth of which at low tide does not exceed 6 meters. They will be termed as wetlands which can be entered into the Ramsar sites. Therefore, it includes all the lakes, rivers, underground aquifers, swamps, marshes and other major water bodies in India. India has a lot of wetlands. About 4.6% of India's land is considered to be as the wetland, and there are 85 Ramsar sites in India now. There is the addition of 3 more sites now through Nanjanayan Bird Sanctuary, the Kajuveli Bird Sanctuary in Tamil Nadu and the Tawa Reservoir in Madhya Pradesh. Now, what is the importance of Ramsar sites? One, they lead to the control of extreme climatic events, for example, flood control, and even in cases of drought, they act as the natural sponges. Because whenever there is the storm water, they temporarily store that storm water and then gradually release it. So they act like the sponges during the times of extreme flood and extreme drought also. Plus, they ensure that the water quality, it is purified. They act as the kidneys of the earth. Like the kidneys in human body, they do the work of purification. They also do the Ramsar sites, the wetlands. They trap the sediments. They remove phosphorus and nitrogen, and thereby they prevent the eutrophication of lakes and other water bodies also. Plus, they conserve biodiversity. As the wetlands, they are a host for the various species of birds, fishes, amphibians, mammals, reptiles, etc. And they ensure that they sequester carbon. They act as sinks for carbon also, and they help in the groundwater recharge and also discharge. During the times of less rainfall, drought, they discharge water also into the local streams, and they regulate the local climate. They also help in bolstering the economy because the fisheries, timber, tourism, recreation, etc., they are all promoted by the conservation and protection of the wetlands. But they are facing various threats. What are the threats to the wetlands? One is the unsustainable development. As per some reports, 87% of the wetlands across the world have been lost in the last 300 years to housing, industry and agriculture because of developmental activities. Plus, another threat is pollution. 80% of the wastewater globally is released into the wetlands untreated. There are invasive species also. Often they are introduced by the anthropogenic activities only, and these invasive species, they eat into the natural biodiversity surviving in the wetlands. The climate change also leads to the damage to the wetlands. For example, the rainfall pattern and the temperature spikes in certain regions because of climate change leads to the disappearance of wetlands. Wetlands are often encroached in the urban areas also for construction activities. And as per a report by the Wetlands International South Asia, 30% of the natural wetlands in India have been lost in the last 3 decades itself. Now, what are the conservation measures put in place to protect the wetlands, the Ramsar sites? One is the Wetland Conservation and Management Rules. They were put in place in 2017. They are to ensure that no wetland is converted for non-wetland uses. For the establishment of any industry, a wetland cannot be diverted. Plus, each state as well as each union territory will have to establish a wetland authority for every state, which will govern the procedures for the protection and conservation of the wetlands. The National Wetland Inventory and Assessment was done by ISRO. ISRO did it through the remote sensing satellites from 2006 to 2011. And a national plan for the conservation of aquatic ecosystems was also put in place. This plan was formed by merging the National Lake Conservation Plan and the Wetlands Conservation Program. This is for both wetlands and lakes. It will avoid the overlap of administrative functions. There is a Center for the Wetland Conservation and Management also. This center will address the research needs and it will fill the knowledge gaps in the conservation and management of wetlands in India. Then there is the Ramsar Convention, which is the intergovernmental treaty. This convention provides the framework for national action and international cooperation for the conservation and wise use of wetlands and the resources that they provide. There is the Montreux Record also. This Montreux Record is for the wetlands where there has already been or where there is a likelihood for adverse ecological changes due to anthropological activities. They are provided protection. In India, the wetlands in the Montreux Record include Keoladev National Park in Rajasthan and the Loktak Lake in Manipur. The next article is related to e-cigarettes. The context behind it is that instead of helping people quit, the various mechanisms like electronic nicotine delivery system, the use of vapes, vape pens, e-cigarettes, etc., they have rather lured children to smoke and it has caused a public health crisis. This is important in GS2 under the topic issues related to health. Now, what are e-cigarettes? E-cigarettes is a common form of electronic nicotine delivery system. In e-cigarettes, there is no use of tobacco, no tobacco leaves are used. What we use is nicotine, and this nicotine is dissolved in propylene glycol and this solution is vaporized. This solution is heated by using an atomizer, a heater, and this vapor is finally inhaled by the smoker. Now, how is it vaporized? It is vaporized by the atomizer using a battery. It draws current from the battery and heats up the nicotine solution, and this produces aerosol by heating, and this aerosol is finally inhaled. So, what does it consist of? There is a sensor which is there in the e-cigarette. This sensor detects whenever a smoker takes a drag. It sends a signal to the processor that switches on the heater. This is known as the atomizer. And this atomizer heats up the nicotine solution to produce a vapor that can be inhaled, and also an LED light is connected at the end of the e-cigarette. It will simulate like a flame so that the smoker gets a feeling that he is smoking a cigarette. And this nicotine dissolved in propylene glycol is filled in a cartridge. Now, what are the health risks associated with this e-cigarette? One is the nicotine solution that is used in the e-cigarettes. This is highly addictive. Plus, it has the potential to stimulate tumor growth. It is termed as non-carcinogenic, but there are studies which are claiming that it might lead to cancer, heart diseases, lung diseases, and even brain development issues, etc. Plus, this e-cigarettes, now the users have found other uses for it. It is being misused for the intake of various other drugs rather than nicotine. As per a WHO report also, the solutions, the nicotine solution and the emissions that it causes, they are toxicants and they cause cancer, heart disease, lung disease, etc. Plus, the argument that it will help smokers to quit smoking is also debatable, as various studies have found that the people who smoke e-cigarettes, they are again more likely to smoke cigarettes further down the line, about 3 times more likely as compared to the people who did not smoke e-cigarettes also. And among the 13 to 15-year-old kids, they are the users of e-cigarettes, and their number is more than the adults also now. Now, what are the regulations put in place to counter the usage of e-cigarettes? 34 countries have banned them. In India also there is a ban under the Prohibition of Electronic Cigarette Act 2019. And this act provides that the production, manufacturing, import, distribution, sale, etc. of e-cigarettes is a cognizable offense, and this will attract a punishment of up to 1 year imprisonment or a fine of up to 1 lakhs. So please do not smoke e-cigarettes. Now we'll be discussing 4 prelim snippets also. The first is related to mass wasting in Tibet. Mass wasting is the movement of rock and soil down slope under the influence of gravity. That is, large rocks, slumps, sand, etc. they slip down the slope and the entire debris flows down the slope, and it leads to mass wasting. Various landforms are also created. For example, gullies are created. Gully is a landform created by erosion from running water or from mass movement of material, or from both. This mass wasting is often lubricated by the rainfall. That is, rainfall adds up to the mass wasting and intensifies it, and it is agitated by the seismic activity, for example through earthquakes. Now, the factors contributing to mass wasting are the volume of material. If the volume is high, then the mass wasting will be more. The water content, if there is more water, again it will lead to more mass wasting, and if the slope is more steep, again there will be more mass wasting. Now, China is planning the world's largest hydropower plant on Brahmaputra. Now, what it will lead to is it will contribute to more sedimentation downstream for Brahmaputra. Brahmaputra is already one of the largest sediment-laden rivers in the world. And this sedimentation will elevate the riverbeds more, and it will accentuate the flood hazards downstream because of more sedimentation. The next article is related to Mudra. Mudra is the scheme to provide affordable credit to MSMEs, the micro, small and medium enterprises. It is to ensure that the enterprises are brought into the formal financial system. It is to fund the unfunded enterprises so that they do not seek funds from informal sources and do not become a victim of loan sharks, etc. Loans are provided up to 10 lakh rupees. These loans are provided for non-farm income generating activities. So if any Indian citizen seeks a loan of up to rupees 10 lakh, he can get a loan under the Mudra scheme if he has a business plan for a non-farm sector income generating activity. There are 3 types of loans which are provided under the Mudra scheme. One is Shishu loan, which is for the amounts up to rupees 50,000. Kishore loans, which is for the amounts between 50,000 to 5 lakh rupees. And Tarun loans, which is for the amounts between 5 lakh rupees to 10 lakh rupees. And please remember that no subsidy is provided under the Mudra scheme for the loans. Now, the next article is related to civic police volunteers, as a civic police volunteer was also involved in the Kolkata incident. The civic police volunteers are the contractual workers. They are engaged by the police to assist them in traffic management and other minor duties, etc. So, what are the conditions for the person to be engaged as a civic police volunteer? In Kolkata, he has to be a resident of the area under the police station where he will be deployed, and at least a class 8th pass, and should not have any criminal record against him. Now, in Chandrakanta Ganguly versus the state of West Bengal case, the High Court had observed that the appointment process of the civic police volunteers was not transparent, it was not up to the mark, as a 5-member interview board had approved about 1,300 people to be engaged as civic police volunteers within a day. How is it humanly or physically possible for 5 people to vet 1300 people in a day? The High Court had also observed that they should not be deployed in any law and order duties, but due to the shortage of police personnel, sometimes they are deployed in law and order duties also. And there are certain cases of excesses which are conducted by the civic police volunteers. There are also allegations that they are the extension of party sometimes. Now the next article is related to Atacama Salt Flat and lithium mining. The Atacama Salt Flat is sinking at the rate of 1 to 2 centimeters every year, and the reason behind this sinking is the extraction of lithium brine from there. The salt-rich water is pumped to the surface from beneath the ground, and once it is pumped, there are a series of evaporation ponds which are constructed, and the water evaporates and eventually it is used to obtain the remaining lithium. But the pumping rate, the rate at which the lithium brine is pumped from beneath the ground, that is more than the recharge rate of the aquifers. It leads to subsidence. That is, there is a downward vertical movement of the earth's surface in that region. Also, it requires about 2000 tons of fresh water to produce 1 ton of lithium. This is causing water scarcity in the already water scarce region, especially the Atacama Desert. Plus, it uses sulfuric acid and sodium hydroxide for lithium extraction, and their leaching leads to contamination of soil and water also. This drop in water levels in Atacama has other side effects. For example, fewer flamingos are reproducing there and the population of flamingos has come down. Now, why do we need this lithium? Because it's considered as the white gold, as it is used in rechargeable batteries, whether in mobile phones, laptops, etc. Thank you.